Welcome to American Black Journal. I'm Stephen Henderson. The well-known civil and human rights organization Focus Hope is celebrating its 50th anniversary this year. The nonprofit was founded to overcome racism, poverty, and injustice through intelligent and practical actions such as education and empowerment. One of Focus Hope's signature events is coming up on Sunday. It is the 44th annual March for Hope. Joining me now is Focus Hope's new CEO, Portia Roberson. Welcome to American Black Journal.
Thank you for having me.
First, congratulations on the new job.
Appreciate that.
We're
Thank you.
Talk about that in a little bit, but let's start by talking about the march.
The march.
The 44th annual march, which seems hard to believe that we're at that number.
Well, we're at 50 years at Focus Hope.
Yeah.
So this was an event that Eleanor was born from Eleanor Jositis. She thought it was extremely important that we go out and be a presence in the neighborhood with regard to what was happening in the communities during that time, and certainly some of that is still happening, sometimes in different ways, but certainly it's as important as ever to be seen in the neighborhood and to be a presence in the neighborhoods and let people know that there are those of us who are out there still committed to the fight against racism, the fight for social justice, against poverty and those issues that affect all of us.
Yeah. Focus Hope, as you say, has been around for 50 years. There are a lot of us who grew up in this community, who grew up with Focus Hope, right? Learning early about what it was about and the role that we could play. Talk about the things that you need people to be doing to sort of participate in this fight for justice and equality today, and how that might be different than what they were like when we were growing up.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think what we see now is, and it's interesting, I've been on the job 3 weeks now, and during that time, one of our staff found some letters that had been written to Eleanor during the time she was at Focus Hope, when Focus Hope was created, were very, some letters that were very loving, but some letters that were not loving, that talked about sort of, how dare you do this kind of work. I think what we see now is that we don't see the letters as much, but we see policy that affects us in the same sort of ways. And so part of what Focus Hope does, and has always done, is workforce development, because I think, and we think, that the path to economic equality is people being employed. And so one of the things that I think people can do to be involved in what Focus Hope is doing and to fight those issues are to come into Focus Hope, to get to know who we are. If you haven't been introduced to us, use us as sort of your community space to sort of meet and talk about these issues. We really have decided to do community advocacy and really explain to people the importance of voting and how it affects your daily life, because those people will be setting policies that will affect what you do. And so those are the kind of things I think people in the communities can get involved involved in, and we, welcome people to come in and talk to us about if they're looking for employment. How can we help that? Because certainly being able to give someone a job where they can support themselves and their families is sort of combating racism as it is now.
Yeah, and the march is, of course, a great way to sort of introduce yourself to the idea.
Absolutely.
Of Focus Hope. But it takes place in Hope Village.
In Hope Village, which is on Oakman. We'll start at Oakman, right where 1200 Oakman, which is where Focus Hope is located. We'll march about 3.8 kilometers, miles, I don't know. I'll be marching, I know that much, right. We have some activities for children so that you can bring your whole family. Slow Roll is joining us this year, which we're really excited about. Yeah. So, but really it's an opportunity to get to know the people that we're living and working with every day and see people. And, we just finished a photo exhibit. First time we've done a photo exhibit. We had great participation. We did a light show on the Bell Building, which rivaled some of the things you see downtown. So we hope that that's something that will continue. But it really is about Detroit and the areas outside of the ones that traditionally we talk about.
Yeah. Talk about that neighborhood. Focus Hope's been there a long time, as we pointed out. How is that neighborhood different than it was before? Is that neighborhood changing in important ways now?
Well, here's the thing. It's been challenged, as every neighborhood in Detroit has been, as the city has been challenged. And so, you'll see some sort of blight. There's no question about that. But what you also see is you see people walking around now in ways that you might not have seen a couple years ago. You see people buying houses in the area. I have been saying to people who have businesses or are renting space in businesses, look at Dexter Avenue. Look at some of those areas where you don't traditionally think about, but because I really feel like those are going to be some very hot areas soon to come. I mean, there's going to be a time, as we've already seen, where you can no longer be in some of the neighborhoods we already know about. And you're going to start looking at other places. And those are places where I think we haven't thought about in a long time, but have the potential, and at one point were the hub of the city that, can be again.
Yeah. When you think about neighborhoods like that or other neighborhoods around the city and the work that you guys are doing, what does the poverty picture look like in Detroit from that vantage point? On a daily basis?
Yeah, it's still extreme. I mean, I'm not going to deny that there's a lot of work to be done. And like I said, the first thing I think you do is you figure out ways in which you can get people into gainful employment. Part of what we also do at Focus Hope, and we have one of the best that does it, is a Head Start program. So we're looking at ways in which we can support someone who wants to get a job, who wants to do training. How can we support them if they have children? How can we make sure that, because I ultimately say that even on a workforce front, if you're not giving an employer the best employee, and an employee can't be the best employee if they're worried about where their children are after school, or if they feel like their children are in a vulnerable space, or sometimes even being part of sort of the in-between generation, you might be living with a grandparent whose food security is not that secure. And so our food program services 41,000 seniors per month. And so we know because of those programs that the need is still there for us, the poverty is still there, and we are looking at ways in which we can address those issues, as well as, like I said, from a community advocacy piece, talk to people, inform people about what sort of the larger issues mean to them in addressing poverty. So how does that voting piece affect someone so that they aren't in poverty anymore?
Right. You came to this job from the Duggan administration.
I did.
Where you were head of the Civil Rights Division in the Law Department. You also worked in the administration of Dave Bing. Civil rights, huge part of Focus Hope as well. Talk about the work that remains there in the city of Detroit and in neighborhoods like Hope Village.
Well, I mean, I kind of flipped sides when I left the Duggan administration, because there we were responsible for, in some ways, ensuring that some of these development projects had Detroiters on those projects. I typically say that in many ways there are lots of Detroiters who've been here the whole time, and not just because they couldn't go anywhere else. That's a narrative that I think is completely untrue. People stayed here, a lot of people stayed here because they wanted to be here, not because they couldn't afford to go someplace else. And we want to ensure that those people and others were included on projects that are happening now in the city. I think now what I'm doing is flipping sides and making sure that those people are prepared for those opportunities. And that those opportunities, of course, my successor predecessor, the city is going to make sure that they are hiring people. How do we make sure that people have the opportunity or have the skills that they need for those opportunities?
Yeah, I should also have said that you worked at the Justice Department.
I did.
Before. That's how you got back to Detroit.
Yep, that is how I got
into
back.
the Bing administration, and that civil rights work was key there too.
Well, yeah, I mean, I worked, as you said, for the Justice Department and for Eric Holder, who was, a key part. Civil rights was an issue for him throughout his whole term as Attorney General, made it at the forefront of the Justice Department. My instruction from him was to make sure that organizations that may not have felt welcome at Justice, or those who did not agree with us, felt like they could come into the Justice Department. So I think it's a continuum for me in terms of my professional career. I started out as a litigator. I don't do much of that anymore, but certainly the idea of addressing the issues that now are much more systemic than they used to be, and are much more policy driven, and keeping sort of looking at ways in which we can fight those policies are important to me.
Yeah, I've got about a minute left, and it may be unfair to ask this kind of question with only a minute left. But I sort of imagine that Father Cunningham and Eleanor Jositis might not have imagined that Focus Hope would have to exist, in perpetuity, right? At some point, we'd get past all of the dire needs that inspired its creation. I'm not sure that's ever going to happen.
Right.
But what do you see 10, 20, 30 years out for the role of the organization as it evolves?
Well, I mean, I think somebody said this to me, and I think it's so very true. I don't know that they would not have seen that the organization would not have needed to exist. I think maybe they would have thought that the expansion in different other areas. Right. And one of the things that, I love about, the history of Father Cunningham and Eleanor Jositis is that they were extremely progressive for their time. Yeah. And so our challenge is to be extremely progressive for our time. And I think 10 years from now, somebody else is going to be there, and they're going to be progressive for their time. And so there will be issues that they expand upon, and that there will be other issues they tackle. There may be, right now we have issues around immigration that they weren't talking about 50, 40 years ago, that are issues that are important to us now. And there will continue to be issues that we need to address as a community. Some of this will never go away, and in some ways that's unfortunate, but in some ways it's not, because it gives us an opportunity to talk amongst each other, get to know each other, and so having those difficult conversations is important even now.
Okay. All right. Congrats on the new job.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
The 44th annual march.
Yes. October 14th.
Yeah. All right. Thanks for being here.
Okay. Thank you.